Today's guest is someone I'm so excited to talk to. He's someone who's known me since before I became Dr. Ari Levy. We met back in high school, actually earlier than that. He's one of my oldest and closest friends. Life and distance and different paths may have kept us apart at times, but the bond has always been there. Dr. Rabbi Nolan Lebovitz is one of the most thoughtful, articulate, and inspiring voices I know. He started out as a filmmaker in Hollywood and then made a dramatic pivot into spiritual leadership. He's now the senior rabbi at Beth Shalom and the author of The Case for Dual Loyalty, as well as a fierce advocate for living a life of depth, meaning, and moral clarity. He's an incredible storyteller, and this conversation goes everywhere from filmmaking to faith, grief to growth, leadership to legacy. If you've ever wondered how someone finds the courage to leave a successful career in search of something more meaningful, or how to lead with vulnerability and conviction in a noisy, divided world, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Nolan, I am so pumped to be here. Thank you for making the time before you head off to Israel.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah. So we were just saying 40 years.
40 years. We've known each other for almost 40 years.
Almost.
Amazing.
That is.
We're 42 years old and almost 40 years. Right.
So listen, I just want to have a conversation. I just want to get into it, kind of hear a little bit about your journey,
Okay.
right? And a little bit about your story. So I'd love to know why SC Film School.
Sure. So first of all, it feels silly to explain to you like how much I loved movies growing up because you were at the movie theater with me a lot. So, I think that a lot of that love and passion is actually coming back to me right now in this moment. I sit around watching movies with my kids. It's like a bonding ritual that we have. And now we're finally at a point where they can watch like really good ones.
What movies from our generation are you showing them that are like must-sees that really carry over well?
I mean, so for sure, we've watched all the Rockies and all the Rambos and all the Star Wars and all that. And by the way, you think these movies some of them age well, some of them don't age well. I had this terrible experience. This sometimes happens as well, where we turn on the movie Major League and my kids are like, so is this supposed to be a comedy? And I'm like, that's it. And I turn it off. I'm like, now nobody gets Major League because they're going to ruin it for me. And that's all that matters. So now Major League is locked away here in a compartment and my kids will never get to see it. But Rocky IV could literally have been made yesterday. My kids watch it of course the Russians are the bad guys. And this is exactly like the world today. And I was like, oh, it's interesting. Sylvester Stallone was some kind of prophet of his time. But we Quentin Tarantino, now that my oldest is a junior in high school, the great Tarantino films now have made their way, and it's fun, and I was sitting on the couch the other day talking about Pulp Fiction, thinking to myself, this is one of the movies that inspired me to we were sitting in a dark theater, we were old enough as teenagers, Pulp Fiction came out right around the time as Forrest Gump and Titanic and all those great movies of the early mid 90s, and they were inspiring. I mean, they had so much to say, and they were so entertaining. There were so many talented young filmmakers coming out at once, and I thought to myself, man, how do first of all, I thought it was all magic. First of all, I didn't grow up going on backstage tours like my kids do, right? Mm-hmm. We weren't from LA. I had no connections in Hollywood, and I thought to myself, how would one even begin to dream about making movies and telling stories? And I read an article about film school. I never heard of such a thing. I mean, it was just assumed
in junior year or senior year?
Yeah, in high school. It was just assumed where we grew up that everybody was going to become doctors and lawyers. It was just assumed.
Case in point.
Yeah, it was just assumed. And so for me to say I wanted to do something drastically different, I think was surprising to a lot of people. And also to me, I thought was perfect. I thought it was, and I also thought that I had this ability to entertain people. And so the idea that I could somehow go to film school and learn how to learn this craft was so compelling to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking back on it, I can see why you went. And I think about when we were in high school back then, and I don't know if I would have described you as creative, but I just probably didn't have enough exposure in that way. You were certainly entertaining, certain center of attention, right, able to captivate an audience.
Right.
Did you ever worry oh, how am I going to go from all of this sort of academic nonsense to this suddenly new creative world, or it just felt like
all the time. I thought that was part of the excitement of it all, was the challenge. And I showed up, and there's a lot of smart people that come out here to say, I want to be the next Spielberg. I want to be the next Scorsese. I want to be, and most of the crew is smart. The problem with film school is that on every crew, you have a cameraman, you have a lighting guy, I actually know the names, but I don't know that everybody in the podcast is going to know names for these different positions. But in film school, everybody who has that position, including the guy making sandwiches, thinks that they're a better director than the director, right? Because nobody's come to film school to become the sandwich guy. That's not a thing. So everybody comes thinking that they are going to be the next Spielberg, and so part of it is also kind of navigating that odd social dynamic, right? So and you have to be socially adept to make it through, and to figure out how to inspire classmates to work on your projects, and all of that is fairly cutthroat, and a good lesson about the way that the business actually works.
So what was the conversation with your parents like?
I think they were supportive. My parents have always been supportive. If I said to them, I'm going to go to be an astronaut, they would have been like, you're going to be the best astronaut in the whole world. As a matter of fact, I think the reason why I was as effective as I was in the entertainment industry was, in the beginning, I would call my parents and be like, you wouldn't believe it, so-and-so, enter big producer name here, read my screenplay, and they told me it wasn't very good. And invariably, my mom's response would be like, what does that person know about reading scripts? They know nothing. And so it was just, I was constantly surrounded by kind of this supportive energy. And I mean, who cares if that producer had won Academy Awards and had a giant house in Malibu and was super successful? Like, that producer was a complete idiot in my house when I'd call my parents. And I spoke to them all the time. So I'd call them every day after meetings. And I knew that the process was maybe even more painful for them than it was for me.
Why?
The truth is, I really didn't understand it until I had kids of my own. We were just talking about this. And so to see your kids try to accomplish their dreams, to see them have dreams, is so promising, and you're so proud of them. And then to see them try to chase them in any way, you want it to work so badly. You want them to be successful in what they want so badly. And at the same time, I mean, we all tell them the same lessons about how, failing is good, it builds character, you learn from it, but it's so painful, and it's so painful to be a part of as a parent. And so my parents never ever said to me, like, I can't believe it, when I'd call them and tell them that a meeting didn't go well. Like, oh man, they would always be like a rock and super supportive, and it was like pep talk right away. It's like, I watch fortunately this year, unfortunately for almost every other year, I'm a Bears fan, just like you. And I watch the Ben Johnson Good, Better, Best like charge every single week. And I think to myself, man, it's like, literally I can hear my mom screaming those kinds of things, like Good, Better, Best. And so I think that I was able to persevere a great deal farther than most people, because I had supportive voices that weren't just in my head, they were actually in my ear.
Have you ever had conversations with them about their uncertainty as you were going through it? Have you ever asked
Yeah,
them?
now I have.
And what would they say?
They were dedicated. My grandparents, all four of my grandparents were survivors of the Shoah. And my dad's parents did everything possible to try to help the best that they could. And he exceeded all their wildest dreams in terms of success. My mom's parents helped her in every way possible get started. And I think that they tried the same exact way with me to try to help in every way possible. I think that I would hope that my kids at some point recognize that I try and do the same thing for them. I think that when you're in your teens and when you're in your 20s, you're not supposed to be able to see
the
that.
long game. It's the long game.
That's right. You're not supposed to be able to see that. So you're supposed to hope that one day you raise like grateful human beings who appreciate what they've been through and appreciate everything that they've been handed and the opportunities. And God willing, that'll happen for our kids too.
So talk to me about being a parent now and what your kids are experiencing with you as a rabbi, the head of a community.
Yeah.
How is that shaping them and you? And
I think that if you want to know my like darkest fear about my career, this is it. It's that somehow my kids will grow up to resent the very thing that I work every day to accomplish.
Resent it or just not appreciate it?
No, I think the fear is even resentment.
Yeah.
So, clergy kids, or pastors' kids as they used to be called, PKs, now clergy kids, there's a profile about them, and some of them break to follow, fall in line and follow their parents, and some of them break to rebel in a different direction. Maybe it's no different than other kids, but I think it's there's certainly a notion that they grow up in a fishbowl because you're so well known inside the community, and so many people feel like you're part of their family. I mean, one of the great honors of my career, of my life, is that a lot of the time I'm one of the first people that gets to meet a child when they're born into this world. And so often I'm one of the last people that somebody will speak to in their lifetime. I mean, think about that. Sometimes it's crazy when I sit back and think about it. And I think about, what has earned me the privilege like this. But I often stand with people in the most intimate moments in their families' lives. Like, I stand with them right before we walk out to a wedding. I stand with them right before we walk out together to a funeral ceremony. I stand with them right before a bar mitzvah occurs, and the weeks building up to it, bat mitzvah. All of these kind of life-changing life cycle events includes me in family portraits. And then a lot of the time, they'll see my kids out at the movies or at a restaurant or whatever it is, and they walk up to say hello, to be friendly, to be whatever. But when you're a high school kid, I don't know that that's what you're looking for in life, is random strangers walking up to ask you, how you're doing, or to introduce you to whoever it is that they're out with, that this is the rabbi's kids. So I think that's part of it. They have to challenge.
So how do you separate? Because that's like a sort of a success, right? A stardom, if you will. Wherever they go, dad is always the rabbi, right? He's been there for all these moments. Like, what are you doing? What are you and Blair doing as parents about that?
So first of all, I try to take them places where we're fairly anonymous. When we go on vacation, we try to go places where we're fairly anonymous. The community, it's always the generosity of this community, and the sensitivity of this community, and the care of this community allows for me to bring my kids to sporting events and all kinds of opportunities. And so sitting at Dodger Stadium with my kids, I think, is one of the great sacred moments of life. I think Dodger Stadium for us has become a sanctuary of sorts. I don't know how to explain to people that baseball fosters better father conversation than maybe any other scenario in life, but I believe that it does. I believe there's something magical about it. And sitting in Dodger Stadium, very few people recognize or care that I'm there. So I think that there's a lot of, I think I try to seek those opportunities, and I think as they get older, they recognize the opportunities that are presented to them because they're my children, maybe. But it's hard. I think it's one of the hardest aspects of my position.
Give me a good conversation you've had at Dodger Stadium.
Good conversation, Dodger Stadium. I think my kids like to, it depends which one, but I mean, like, conversations about the celebrities who are there, right? Who are the best celebrities I've ever met, or who would they like to meet? We talk about what people do for jobs that allows them to sit in those blue seats right up front is a great conversation. We talk about whether it be the food at Dodger Stadium, or where we'd like to go in the world. We talk about things that my kids have read about the Dodgers in their personal lives. I mean, everybody in LA feels like this group of players is very much like part of our lives, right?
Right.
So,
I mean, it's a pretty magical window.
It's a pretty magical window. That's exactly right. So, it's not often that you have a baseball team where, 4 or 5 players are going to the Hall of Fame immediately upon their retirement. They're all first balloters. So I think that, like, to talk about them, to distract us a little bit, I think is great. I also think that LA is one of the best cities in the world, and Dodger Stadium is maybe the crowning jewel in the sense that Dodger Stadium is still one of these places that brings people together from so many backgrounds and so many walks of life and socioeconomic backgrounds and statuses and it's a real melting pot of LA. And so you get that only at Dodger Stadium because unfortunately so many other venues have been closed down to that.
So you were saying that you spend time at the beginning of life, at the end of life, celebrations, right, and mourning. What's the hardest part about your job?
So you would think that in rabbinical school, I thought the hardest part about my job would be to stand as a representative, or in rabbinic talk as some kind of symbolic exemplar of God for people.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had that many experiences where people come into my office and say, how could God have allowed this thing to happen to me? You're trained to respond to that. You're trained that this is a possibility. I don't think that people say that to me because when truly awful things happen, if you're sitting there with them and you're truly open and you're susceptible to feeling their kind of despair, I think they feel like you're with them. You're with them. You share with them this kind of heavy, heavy grief. We do a lot of funerals here, and I've now had the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to sit with so many families in kind of these telling moments. I've had the unfortunate and the fortunate because it's allowed me. People ask me. People come to this office. I've had the moment where I've stood at a graveside for an unborn child, and I think that when you stand in these moments where kind of the natural order is broken, there's almost nothing to say. There's almost nothing to say. And the idea that I can open my mouth and even say anything, I think is usually always inspired by sacred texts. So I think that, and what I've learned is that there's a profound power in those texts. And so to open up the book of Psalms and to start reading, or to, find a piece of scripture that conveys even a jumping off point for the despair that is felt in that moment, allows you to convey that you even are in the same pool of existence as people who are going through it. And so I feel like the natural world is something that we all kind of take for granted in the sense that, the progression of life cycles are all going to, when that cycle breaks for whatever reason and things come up out of order, that's when I feel like I've reached the hardest part. And so then rabbis give advice to each other on what to do in those moments, right? Because I have to leave the cemetery or I leave the hospital after saying goodbye to somebody. And I actually try my best to not go directly home. Okay, so I try my best. That was advice given to me early on. And I actually think it's great advice, like to try to not bring that energy back into the house. And so I hope Howard Schultz is watching because I've walked into a million Starbucks and just gotten a coffee and sat down. And sometimes I'm sitting next to like a couple on a date getting to know each other. And sometimes I'm sitting here in LA next to a homeless person. But I feel like I get that cup of coffee and I sit there and it allows me to decompress.
So who do you call? Who do you talk to when you're a mess?
So first of all, if I'm a mess, I can call my wife, I can call my parents, I can call my predecessor here, I can call mentors, and I think it's really important to understand, and I think that this is something that I speak about with a lot of people our age who are attaining success, is that my life and the happiness of my life cannot solely be defined by the work that goes on at this table.
Amen.
right? So
Say more about that.
yeah, so people use like all kinds of like new agey, what I find to be like, you know, highly problematic sayings like work-life balance. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There's no such thing as work-life balance. As soon as somebody brings me work-life balance, I think they automatically should be fired. That's what like that. I can't stand that idea that someone comes into the office and says, you know,
Because there's no such thing as balance.
there's no such thing.
You're
as
moving
balance.
from thing to thing to thing.
All that means is, so you want to spend half your life at home? Like, let me understand. I want to unpack this with you, but let's just move past that. But there's a lot of kind of sayings like that drive me insane. But I think that you have to have the meaning of or purpose of your life be derived from family, or at least for me, I should say. For me, it is derived from family. And there's a lot of people here in the synagogue that I think of as family. There's a lot of people here in the community that I think of as family. But I have to understand that one day, just like I walked into this office and sat down at my desk and had this conference table waiting for me, and had the opportunity to begin making decisions and represent the one of the most special Jewish communities in the world, Valley Beth Shalom. One day I'm going to walk out of this office and somebody else is going to take this.
Like 120 years.
In 120 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Moses gave up his position moments before he passed. And I think that's not the way ultimately that I'd like to go out. I'd like to have an opportunity to walk out of here with all of my faculties like Moses, but enjoy time with family, get to know grandkids and whatnot, and enjoy life. And so I think that part of this phase of my life has to not only be working in this office to serve this community and the Jewish people, it has to also be working to create that possibility that my kids will actually want me in their lives.
Yeah. Well, and I get to see you. I've seen you now, you know, as we've talked about it. I mean, from film school to producing to becoming, you know, going to rabbinical school, and you've sort of told the story, right? How we all knew you'd be a rabbi, or Blair and family knew it for sure, and you got there. And then there was a period where you were not, like, you were figuring it out with the last.
Rabbinical school is hard, and it's 5 years, and we moved to Israel as a family for one of those years. So we lived in Jerusalem. At that point we had 2 kids, which was an amazing experience. And we came back, we were pregnant with our third, and it was hard. And I started out at a wonderful small community that I was really fearful was going to, you know, collapse on itself. I was really fearful at the beginning that the community was in a tenuous position, and decisions that I made might break it. And so as it turned out, when I started working there and the community began, you know, a kind of resurrection of sorts, and began growing and building, and we got into building mode, I was there for 7 years. It was a great experience. It was a great experience. And in a lot of ways, I feel like it prepared me for this position. Like, anybody goes through any career. Like, if it's baseball, you go through the minor leagues, and, you know, there are dog days of summer where you're not sure that you're going to make it up. And I didn't know what the early part of my career would lead to. And I think a lot of times when I watch these kinds of podcasts, and I'm sure you're going to interview people who are much more successful than me, but I think that when people sit there and say like, oh, like, my goal was this, and so I just had no idea to work to attain it. I really never believed that story, because there were so many kind of random acts along the way that steered my career.
And you were having sleepless nights. I mean, I remember us talking.
I still do. That's like my biggest problem. If you ever talk about health, is sleep. And I don't know, does it have something to do with like 5 cups of coffee and 4 Coke Zeros a day? Maybe. But I get up and I feel like,
we'll get your doctor to talk to our doctors, and we'll figure that out.
I feel as though if that's my one vice, health-wise, sleep is hard for me. It's been hard for a long, long time, and I feel like a lot of what I do here during the day weighs on me at night.
So I'm going to flip the script on you for a quick second,
Sure.
Because as a doctor, right, one of the most important and significant things to be able to do is repair and recover.
Right.
So in order for you, to serve your community, how are you getting, how are you able to process? And good consolidated sleep
Yeah.
is a window where
Right.
your body and brain do it.
Right.
So,
So I think
so for the community, right?
for
I
everybody
wasn't
who's
done
sick.
talking. For the community, right?
Yeah.
We all want you to make sure you're getting sleep because that's going to allow you to show up better substantively, and it's going to prevent you from aging faster.
So I think this is like such a great topic. Not that there's a not that there's a counterpoint to sleep, to the sleep conversation. I know sleep is important, but I also think that especially if you understand kind of the eternal nature of the Jewish tradition, right? Like you went to medical school and you got your MBA, and you I don't know if you got out of school and began in your mind running a race against the people who graduated the same year that you did.
Always.
Always, right?
Always.
So that race ultimately like comes to an end, and then you meet peers who are successful, and you're like, now I'm running a new race, right? I'm making a different lap. I feel as though when you're a leader in the Jewish community, you're running a race with a lot of people, but you're also running a race with kind of the leaders that we talk about in the Jewish Hall of Fame, right? So it's not that I think that that I'm competing somehow with Maimonides, who wrote the Mishneh Torah at 33, right? A compendium of 14 books that transformed Jewish law forever. But I do think that
But a close second.
But we only have a finite amount of time to make real impact.
So if your better half was sitting here,
yeah,
right? What would Blair say is your blind spot on that?
Oh, I think she doesn't think I take care of myself well enough. I'd say that for sure. I think a lot of people don't think I take care of myself well enough. But like, if I got an hour more sleep a night, but was less productive, is that a better version of me? In all honesty,
you were less productive,
right?
How so unpack the logic sequence there.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So if at night I didn't respond to as many emails, or I didn't write more articles, or I didn't wake up. It's not really night that really affects me. It's waking up early in the morning, right? So if I didn't wake up at 5, right, which is a normal time for me to wake up. If I didn't wake up at 5 to write, I wrote my book mostly between like 5 and 7.
Yeah.
Okay. If I slept till 6, is that a better me?
So I'm not talking about. So let's be clear. I'm not talking about changing the habit, but I'm talking about giving yourself the space and the room to get the sleep that you need, so you feel nourished and refreshed to come into the day.
Right.
So the counter argument to that is, well, what if you are 3 times more efficient and effective with the actual waking hours, right? So your perception, right, is that you're doing this in that last hour and that first hour or whatever, but what if it's not?
What if it's not? What if it's not? I mean, somebody far more qualified than me, but probably not as qualified as you, told me that it would be really helpful if I went home and took a nap in the middle of the day. Okay? So, I mean, there are lots of different strategies to how to get more sleep during the day. I don't see myself taking a nap during the day, but I certainly heard it.
You feel like you have a purpose-driven life?
I do have a purpose-driven life.
100%, right?
100%.
Okay.
And I think that's part of the reason that drives me as much as it does, right?
100%.
And I think that I understand when, when I read about other leaders of the Jewish people, kind of sacrificing so much. I think if you love what you're doing, and you see so much of the special nature of the opportunity that you've been afforded, I think you're automatically compelled. You're driven
100%
by the purpose that you're.
So the question that I have then for you is, how are you building the support system, and who are the people behind you that can check that, right?
Yeah, so I think I do a good job. I mean, you were welcomed to this building by a handful of those people that I've built into my professional life that take care of a lot of the, let's say, tasks that they clear out a lot of tasks for me so that I don't have to do everything myself anymore. I think I was blessed by just inheriting a lot of these people in this institution. I mean, the biggest difference between my previous community and this community is in my previous community, we worked in that synagogue as a staff of 3 to 4 people, depending on the year, right? And this synagogue has a staff of hundreds of people if you include all the teachers, hundreds of people, right? If you just include the admin wing, dozens and dozens of people. And the caliber of that kind of work then clearly increases. At the same time, you spend hours listening to, HR issues and people issues, and that's so frustrating. That's probably one of the most frustrating parts of this position is that kind of work. But that's part of working with human beings.
Talk to me about where you see people today. What's happening with religion? Is it a dying concept? Is it a growing concept? For a lot of years, right? A lot of the religious institutions have been seeing a decrease in membership and even incoming clergy, et cetera.
So let's start here by saying, I think every generation of Jews have believed that they were the last generation of Jews. Okay? This is a strange reality that our people exist in, but every single generation has thought like, oh my God, this has existed for 2,000 years, but we're going to ruin it. We're going to screw it up, right? Because we're not as good. So that's just part of who we are as a people.
Yep.
And I think that what makes this moment tricky and confusing is that the world around us is becoming increasingly polarized and divided. That schism is growing, and the Jewish people, for better or for worse, is part of the world, right? And so whatever is happening in America actually affects American Jews. Whatever's happening in Britain actually affects the way that British Jews behave. Certainly what's happening in the state of Israel not only affects Israeli Jews, but actually affects all of us everywhere, right? Because we're all interconnected. And we as American Jews are actually interconnected to both the American system and American society and our brothers and sisters in Israel, whether we like it or not. And all you have to look at is like people who have come this year and last year since October 7th to say they were never religious, they were never identified, they never had a strong Jewish identity, and they come to work and all of a sudden they're being called a colonial, oppressive, jerk for all sorts of reasons, and they don't understand why this is suddenly happening. Well, the truth is that we're all interconnected, that whether you like it or not, whether you choose it or not, if you're born Jewish, you're part of us. And if you choose to become Jewish, you're part of us. So you asked me a question, and it's very Jewish of me to accept some parts and reject some parts, to say, what's going on with Judaism, what's going on with religion? Well, I don't think it's always the same thing, because I don't think necessarily Judaism is a religion. Okay, so I think
Totally fair point.
I think Christianity is a religion, and let's say it was in some ways the model that was used in, let's call it 19th century, 18th century European university life. Departments of religion emerged, and Christianity became the focal point of that, and Christian philosophy became the focal point of that. And the great inheritors of those traditions, like the University of Chicago religion department, and the philosophy that exists out of there, and the Harvard University School of Divinity and the philosophy that emerges out of there, they're the great inheritors of those traditions that wanted religion to be taught at the university level. So Judaism was forced to fit into that box, because certainly if Christianity was the main topic, then Judaism as the father or the predecessor, or however you want to understand Judaism to
It was a
Christianity,
religious concept.
should be a religious concept. But I don't think it is a religious concept. I think that Judaism is much more aligned with the notion of family than it is with the notion of religion. So in religion, a person can be thrown out of a church or a synagogue or an organization because they no longer believe. But if you walk into my synagogue on a Shabbat morning, I were to poll the hundreds of people who are there and say, how many of you believe in God as described in the Torah? I'm not sure that half the people would raise their hand. So, and not only that, like if you went around my Shabbos table on a Friday night and my extended family was there and said, let's all talk about X, Y, and Z, I'm not sure that we all hold the same positions. In that way, and nobody is thrown out. right? Nobody's evicted from the synagogue, from the sanctuary, because somebody says something about God. Somebody says that they don't believe a section of the Torah actually happened, that it's not literally true. These are not problematic ideas for the Jewish people, right? Because we are aligned as a family, not as a religion. So even if someone says something heretical, they are not thrown out of the family. They're not thrown out of the family.
It's all cultural ties.
Just like if somebody says something that bothers you, both as a rabbi and as a communal leader and as a teacher, I don't think that person should be banned from your Thanksgiving, right? And all of us have problematic people that come to our Thanksgiving, right? Some of them we're closer with, some of them we're not, but we should be more forgiving. So here we are. Religion has a certain problem, and that is that everything is being polarized. Everything is being polarized. Everything is splitting across partisan lines. And so the question is, the right end of our spectrum sees a religion being co-opted into what it is that they want to do. The left sees religion being co-opted into like a social justice, calling. And they both feel like religion is supportive of what it is that they want. And I really believe that at this moment, Judaism our tradition calls upon us in this moment to fill the rational center, this great void that is disappearing in this country. I think that right now we have a very special responsibility, not only to be the light unto the nations, which is what most Jews understand, that we were all taught in school growing up, the Jews were to be the light unto the nations. Well, what does that mean in this moment? It actually means that we ought to think differently. You're not only supposed to think about like what I believe in this moment to be right, but what does that do to my neighbor as a result? And how do we bring each other closer together rather than drive each other farther apart? Now, all of this is complicated because on some issues, I think there is no other rational side, of course, and I'm me, but I really believe that we have to be a people that is trying our best to endeavor to bring people back to the middle, back to rationality, back to the centrism. And it's difficult to walk down the street with a placard and scream out like, moderation. Nobody wants that. That's not inspiring, right? But if there's no middle, if all we do is drive further and further apart into the horseshoe of political science, where the ends actually appear much closer together, that horseshoe is extremely dangerous for the Jewish people.
Say more.
And so I think what you see happening in New York unfolding in a political sense with the mayor-elect Mamdani is extremely dangerous for the Jewish people. I think what you see in everything that he has to say about what I believe to be just kind of a regurgitation of Marxism for this moment is always played out to be difficult for the Jews. Ultimately, somebody has to be blamed for people's lot in lives, and he's begun to explain that Israel is the blame for all of our foreign policy issues, which is easy for him because he has no control over foreign policy. So a scapegoat is being created where he's not going to attend Israel. He's trying to carve Jews away from Israel to say he'll go to support Jewish citizens of New York, but he won't attend Israel functions for those same Jewish citizens. Tries to very much instill a divide, making Jews have to make a choiceless choice. I think that in the same way that he is saying that Americans have gotten a bum deal and this isn't the land of opportunity anymore, you can hear almost the same rhetoric, toxic rhetoric being espoused on Tucker Carlson and other podcasts on the right. And I think you see the Heritage Foundation not backing away from it. I think that it's difficult to delineate these two kind of ends of the horseshoe to say they're both radically nuts, right? They're both totally irrational about this moment. And to reclaim America, we have to drive back to the center. We have to say that somebody who looks and feels presidential should probably be the president. It shouldn't be somebody who wants to burn down America and say it should be rebuilt. Like, we should say America's always been a place of promise and fixing promise. And a lot of that fixing still needs to occur. But the truth is that a lot of this is blessed and blessing. And we can't deny the fact that I think that most of us would recognize that we are probably the luckiest people in the world to be born into this country in this moment. And we don't say that enough. And the question is, can we afford to offer more opportunity to more people? And if we start from that place and say, can we afford to offer more blessing to more people? I think ultimately we stand in the same place as Abraham and Sarah. And I think that question of how do the most people receive the most blessing is the most, let's say, positive aspect of a religious outlook. It's the most positive aspect of a Jewish tradition being applied today.
So how do you handle when a congregant or a Jew says, well, we've got to preserve and protect, anti-Semitism's growing, we can't, like, we have to wall off?
Yeah, so I think walling off for, whether it be America first, or whether it be in the Jewish community when Jews say, like, we have no friends. So first of all, it feels a lot of the time like we have no friends. It does. It feels a lot of the time like we're totally isolated. I'll tell you that after October 7th, I'll just share with you a story. It's short. After October 7th, there were no other religious faith leaders that reached out to me to say, like,
Are you okay?
We can't believe this is happening to you. Are you okay? It's not only because of what happened in Israel on October 7th, it's because all of a sudden you woke up on October 8th and 9th, and there were literally terror parades walking down the street, right? So who would have thought that, like, 20 years after 9/11, basically in Manhattan, there would be people who would put on Hamas masks and carry flags and walk down the center of New York City, celebrating the terror that had been perpetrated there, and in the same tradition as the terror that had been perpetrated in New York. So we sit in this place where I think a lot of us felt isolated, disappointed. We felt like the friendships and the allyships that had been created over the years were completely fraudulent, that they didn't support us in a time when we needed it. I went to a conference in Miami, excuse me, and I was sitting there, and it was a conference for Zionist rabbis. And a gentleman stood up whose name was Reverend Johnny Moore, who has become more famous since he became the leader of the Gaza Humanitarian Fund that Trump had created. And he stood at that dais and said, "You have more friends than you think. My children will show up for your children at college campuses. You might not want my children there, but my children will show up for your children at college campuses, and I will show up for you. And even though we have a lot in common, people like to focus on the, let's say, 30% that divide us." So he said, but I don't want to focus on that. So he really talked about, in his evangelical perspective, how there were 70% that unites Jews and evangelicals, and most Jewish communities focus on the 30%, and we should focus on the 70%. So I sat there listening to him, and so first of all, it was incredibly inspiring, and I thought to myself, he's wrong. How could this be true? How could it be true that there are, like, leaders all throughout the country that support us, and I don't feel it and I don't know it? So I came back here and I sat at this table, and I thought to myself, I'm going to do something totally crazy. I'm going to call a pastor 3 miles from here. Okay? I'm going to call a pastor in Bel Air at a big church, and I'm going to invite him to coffee. So I called I was very nervous. It was like asking somebody out on a date, like, that you never met before. I was very nervous. I called him and I said, "Pastor, it's Rabbi Lebovitz down at Valley Beth Shalom. We've not yet had a chance to meet each other. Oh, I've heard wonderful things about you, blah, blah, blah. Great. So would you like to come over for coffee?" Certainly. Made a time. He came over the following week. The greeting that you had of staff people, he had 10 times. I'm like, everybody has to be on their best behavior. The senior pastor is coming. Like, he should be greeted every 10 steps, ask if he needs a cup of coffee or whatever it is. So he had, like, the complete red carpet rollout. It was during, like, parent drop-off The campus was crazy, absolutely crazy, right? I always make a joke about like, how do you know that this is a Jewish school? It's because you drive in the parking lot and you see cones knocked over everywhere, right? So he pulled up in like this very chaotic moment. Nothing went right. Like people didn't go up and greet him the way that it was. He walks onto the campus. I go down there to meet him, and I said to him, can I get you a cup of coffee? Sure. And we walk around the campus. He hadn't been here in 10 years. And we finally make our way up to this table. And it's at this table that I drew the courage to ask him, like, Pastor, I have to ask you, like October 7th, where does your community stand in terms of what happened in Israel and what's happening to the Jewish community? And he said to me, my gosh, Nolan, I feel like we could do so much more. We could have done so much more. We should do more. So I said, what have you done? I thought to myself, my God, I'm right. I was right all along, right? And he said, the only thing that we've done so far is we had the Israeli Consul General come speak to the community. We had soldiers from the IDF come speak to the community about their experience fighting in Gaza, about them being the most moral, humane military in the history of warfare. We had hostage families come speak to the community. And he went down a long list of these programs. They were the exact programs that we had here at Valley Beth Shalom. And he said, and we should have done more. I should have reached out to you. We should have come together. And I thought to myself, my God, like Reverend Moore was exactly right. He was exactly right. All of us were doing the same types of things. None of us were in communication or connected to each other. Since that point, Pastor Sam's has become a good friend, Pastor Drew, and we brought my board of directors and his board of elders went to the October 7th art exhibit when it came to Los Angeles together, and we started to build a relationship. So much so that when there were the fires of Los Angeles, he called us. He called me on a Saturday morning before I came to Shul. He called me to say, I have no idea what state the church is in. Bel Air Church has been there for decades and decades. And do you know? And I said, Drew, I said, you're gonna have to be more Jewish in the situation. Just come out and ask me what you need, because I want to give it to you. He said, can we come use your campus to worship on Sunday morning? And I said, it would be our pleasure. They're lovely. They're lovely. When I went over to visit the community, he gave me a tour of Bel Air Church. It's one of the most gorgeous campuses you'll ever walk in your entire life. And he walked me into the old chapel, and he said to me, I'm going to tell you something very special about this chair. He said, do you see this chair with this small gold star on the chair? And I said, yeah. And he said, this chair with the small gold star, this is where President Reagan used to sit on Sunday mornings for services. Do you see how your eyes just went up? And I smiled and started to laugh. And he said, why are you smiling? And I said, Pastor Drew, if any president of the United States ever came to VBS for services, we would encase that seat that they sat in with lucite. There would be donor names on it. We would make a dedication. We would write like a Hebrew blessing on it. It would be all kinds of, there'd be a light that would shine, that would beam right on that chair 24 hours a day. This is like such a discreet little gold star. So there are real differences between our communities. We laugh about it privately, and I also talk about it on podcasts, but we're neighbors. Like, we should know each other. Like the idea that we didn't know each other for years, I take as much ownership of that as anybody. And it really took a very challenging, honest comment by a brave reverend standing in front of a group of rabbis to say, you're all wrong. You have many more friends in this country than you think. And for 2 years, I wore the dog tag for the hostages. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty easily identifiable as Jewish. I mean, I walk around everywhere with my kippah on. You last name Lebovitz. There's a whole lot of ways that someone could even the worst detective would figure it out. And in 2 years, I think the experience was so powerful and so positive, with people coming up to me left and right saying, we're with you, we support you. And I also think that we are an insular people. We are an insular people. Just a few weeks ago, after 2 years of wearing the dog tag, I took it off when the 20 hostages were returned, the 20 living hostages. And we had a ceremony here at the synagogue. And then the next day, Blair, or 2 days later, I think Blair was like at a supermarket. My wife was at a supermarket, and as the teller was checking her out, she said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No, I've been up like all night watching the news. I've been watching the hostage release." And she's like, "Is that a new Netflix show?" So like, we assume that everybody is like consumed with the same news that we're consumed about. It's not true. Like, it's not true. Just like our family's not consumed with the news going on in your family all the time. We are one big family, and we act with our own idiosyncrasies. And what's fascinating is like, when I walk into a synagogue in Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, London, Rome, Jerusalem, those idiosyncrasies are relatively similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're relatively similar. So we have an incredible power to replicate and the tradition, but that's why I think we're far more of a tradition or a family than we are a religion. I think that there is a moment, just to come back to your question that you asked me 20 minutes ago, I think that there is a moment, an opportunity for religious revivalism. Because I think religion will come to fill the void of these questions of why things haven't worked out for so many people. Just like there could be a socioeconomic, political answer that I think is mistaken and ill-intended, which is like a resurrection of like socialist Marxist views. I think that religion can also fill and explain why bad things happen. I think that most of the time, the religion that fills those spaces tends to be toxic. And so, the religion that explained why there was so much devastation in New Orleans after Katrina is not the type of religion I want my kids to learn and to follow, right? The religion that fills these spaces. Religion that's hard is religion that challenges you, tradition that challenges you, and tradition that calls you to be the better self. And I think that right now, I feel this calling that we're all supposed to become the better version of ourselves, but that involves people criticizing their own tribe and wanting to pull their own tribe closer towards their neighbor.
Holding the tension.
Yeah, but I also think it's actually reaching out to your neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
to other communities, and saying, let's focus on the 70%.
So VBS is stronger because you and your community are connecting with more people, more communities.
For sure. I think that's true. I think we connect more now with Israel than we ever have before. And I think that we connect more with our community around us than we ever have.
You feel more supported by the community around you?
I do. I feel tremendously supported by the community. I feel really supported. I mean, any qualitative or quantitative measure, I think, would reflect that we are stronger today than we were just a few years ago. Membership is up, development is up, the budget is up, we have more schools enrolled, we have more kids enrolled in all of our schools. And I think even more important than that, this has become a place that fosters ideas that help us envision the Jewish tomorrow.
Yep.
This has always been a great institution that held learning and education at its core. That was a value for Rabbi Schulweis. That was a value for my predecessor, Rabbi Feinstein. I also think that October 7th changed the nature of that sense of learning, in the sense that it's crucial to learn, but it's also time, as I talk about in my book, it's time to, the case for dual loyalty, available on Amazon, it's time to recalibrate maybe the pie chart of values that we teach and espouse in this moment.
Unpack that.
I think we grew up in a very different American Jewish reality. And I think that we felt like, or Jewish leaders of that time felt like, notions like tikkun olam and social justice were an imperative for us. And I also think that was a way of showing us that we are part of this kind of do-good culture, right?
Yeah.
And doing good in social justice work really, I think, dials up a kind of universalist understanding of the world and dials down the particularist notion of your identity.
Yep.
Right?
I also think we're in a really interesting time where post-Holocaust, right, post-Nuremberg
That's right.
trials, you had lots of living survivors,
Right.
and we're at a point, right, where they're almost all gone.
They're almost all gone, right? And so the sense of who we were was almost safeguarded and protected by them, and we were raised to be. We felt like we could be different because, in a certain way, history had ended.
Right, we had the
Right.
umbrella.
Anti-Semitism was over. We were living in kind of a utopian state of American Jewish life that existed in the, let's say, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I think that part of the reality is that the survivor generation is gone. Part of the reality is that the political reality here in this country has become so divisive.
Yeah.
Part of it is that the world, in fact, has become so divisive, almost along every line imaginable. And so when October 7th happened, I think that it really forced front and center for the Jewish people, like this choice that was presented to us in the Torah itself. In the book of Numbers, when all of the tribes are coming with Moses up to the land of Israel, we get to the wrong side of the Jordan River, right? And 2.5 tribes come up to Moses and say, we've been thinking about it. We really like the school systems here. We like the sports teams. We like the language. We're going to stay on this side of the Jordan River. We're not actually going to go into the land of Israel. Moses loses his mind and tells them, like, we've been walking in circles for 40 years. What did you think the point of this was? But he essentially asked them a question. And the question is, like, will your brothers and sisters go to war inside the land and you not show up? That's the question that he asked. That question was asked of us as American Jews on October 7th. Will your brothers and sisters be attacked and go to war and you not show up? And I'm proud to think that the American Jewish community showed up. I mean, by every measure, we showed up. We showed up in terms of raising resources. We showed up in terms of volunteer hours. We showed up in terms of reaching out to all of our cousins, finding everything that we could, advocating in every sense. We showed up in terms of every organization, increased in terms of purpose, in terms of membership. And I think that we are stronger as organizations because of all of these conflicting situations. People want to find a place where they feel safe expressing their Jewish identity. So no matter how religious you are at home, no matter how religious you are in your life, people walk into synagogue, I believe, and like exhale from the outside and they feel safe.
And what you're providing is a way for them to feel connected as well.
That's right.
Right. So
in a way to feel reinforced, supported. I mean, it's not only that they connect to other Jews in the community, it's that they feel like they can behave differently here than they can at Little League, just like a mile from here, right? At that Little League, in this community, there are many, many Jewish families that are there, but they can behave differently here according to a different value set. And the tradition, our tradition, has always been governed by value set, basically. So those midot, or those attributes that we hope to instill and that we hope to, manifest into the world, those are everything. And I feel like this is a place where people can get it. They can taste it.
And you're relatable. It's real. Like, you can connect and taste Judaism much more than the scripture and the text from a religious perspective, right? It's a lot more cultural, dare I even say, right, ethnic, and we'll call it familial, right? But it's a place where I can find others like me.
Right. So you can't learn Judaism in a classroom. right? You can come to a class and I can.
No, it is taught.
It is taught.
It is taught.
It's taught in every university around the country. It's taught and by the way, like
every Hebrew school,
every day school, everything. It is taught. You can only learn Judaism being surrounded by Jews.
By living it.
Because thank God it is still a living, breathing, vibrant tradition. So what bothers me, if you want to get them, we can do a whole other podcast, like what annoys the rabbi. Here we go.
Okay. Do it.
People come back all the time to the synagogue and say, Rabbi, I just had the greatest experience. Like I went to insert European country here. All right. And I went to the most moving Holocaust memorial. And I stood there and bawled my eyes out. And then I came back and I wanted to tell you about it. And what I want to say is like, there are no more Jews in that place that you went to. Like that piece of stone that you saw, that you cried at, right? It was very meaningful, and we should derive meaning out of living Jews, right? I derive meaning when I walk down the street here outside the synagogue, or when I go to Tel Aviv and I'm surrounded by living, breathing Jews who not all live the same way that I would want to live, right? I walk up and down the beach in Tel Aviv and look at all these Jews who, have so many tattoos, you would think it's a mitzvah to get a tattoo.
It's not about remembering alone, it's about building.
It's about building and living for the next generation. Because if you only derive meaning and purpose out of the stone monuments, you will in fact be part of the last generation of Jews.
100%.
So you either have to decide in this moment that you are going to devote yourself to stone monument Judaism or to messy, living, breathing Judaism. And messy, living Judaism is the place where I derive my inspiration. It's the place where I learn from. It's the place where I see, conviction, and I see conversation, and I see argumentation. Right? It's all of it. It's all of it.
It's where you figure it out.
It's where you figure it out. It's where you figure it out. And that's the best of us. That's the best of us in every sense. That's the best of us in terms of a Jewish people. That's the best of us in terms of an America. Like we used to be a country that figured it out and we came together.
So what are you, you've described already, but like what are the other ways in which you're trying to create that messy middle where you can figure it out and people can come together?
Well, I think some of it is through education. Some of it is through speakers from around the Jewish landscape. Some of it is also defining the tent at this point, like what's in and what's out. So on the morning of October 7th, I came on the bima and I said, we're going to stand in solidarity with Israel. That's what we're going to be. This is a decision that's going to make some people in this community feel uncomfortable being ardent Zionists. As it turns out, there were more people that came to the community than left the community, because I think people were desperately seeking definition.
People want guidance.
The murkiness, the center can't be a place of murkiness, right? It has to be a forward-looking vision.
And you had elders, right? So one of the things I think about generationally is like, who are your council of elders? Who are the people you can learn and glean from? And they're not, necessarily all the institutions we once thought they were. They're not as stable as they were before. So seeing that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think it's probably true for every business. Like people who are creating AI, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming that there are elders in the technology world that also meddled in this kind of beginning of whatever it is. I pick kind of the thing that's like most opposite what I think. Like I deal with a scroll that gets lifted and read directly off the scroll. So I don't necessarily think of it as AI conducive, but I'll tell you that I think that everybody needs teachers. We are Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of our fathers, the wisdom of our ancestors says, acquire for yourself a teacher. So everybody has to seek out a mentor. It's very powerful.
Who are your teachers?
Well, I think first and foremost, there's my dad and mom. There's my family, my wife and kids. I also think that the dean of the rabbinical school I attended, I'm still very close with. My predecessor, I'm close with. My mentor from early on in my career, I'm close with. I was his intern for many years. And now I'm fortunate enough that, there are authors from around the world, around the Jewish world, Israel included, that that frequent my dinner table. That my kids know their names and they know my kids' names. I think that's one of the bizarre perks of being my kid, is that you get to sit at the table and Gil Troy just shows up, or name the speaker, and you get to ask them questions. But I also think that tomorrow I'm going to Israel with a group of 10 black pastors from around the United States. And that trip was put together by Pastor Dumasani Washington, who I think is an incredible leader. And I was proud that he asked me to be on the board of directors of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. And I think that it's just another opportunity for our people in our community to find friendship out in the world. I think that we can do a better job finding friendship. It's easier to find animosity.
Yep.
So I think that's a challenge for all of us now. It's not just a people challenge, it's an individual challenge.
So you have wise elders. Are you able to still have friends?
I have you.
But I think about that.
I mean, maybe not good friends, but I have friends. I have people who invite me onto their podcast.
Well, I think about this. Like, you are now the head of a community.
Yeah.
You're out there and about. You're always on camera.
Yeah.
Right. We're on camera.
I'll tell you a funny story. Like, we had a bunch of people over for Shabbos dinner, and somebody in this community who I do consider a friend leaned over to me during dinner. There were like 20 people around the table. We were all laughing and kidding. He leaned over to me during the dinner and said to me, like, right now, is this like work for you, or are you having fun? It's all, like, my whole life, there's no distinction.
There's no boundary.
There's no boundary. I'm the least boundaried person. So if somebody comes up, like if somebody rings the doorbell, like, I'll go home after this, and 10 seconds after walking in the house, I'll be in my Bears Zubaz pants and a ripped t-shirt.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's what I wear. And when those Bears Zubaz pants get faded out, Blair buys me a new Bears Zubaz pants. And that's my, so like literally a minute after I get in the house, I'm going to be in the oven. And if somebody comes and needs to see me and comes to the house,
that's what you're in.
That's what I'm in. That's what I'm in. They're going to come sit. They're going to come sit in the living room with me, and I'll be the same guy. Just like I think I'm the same guy, here as I am in Dodger Stadium, as I am in the old city of Jerusalem. I just think that there's no sense for me in that set of boundaries. Boundaries to me, for my life, don't work that well.
It's not going to work. It's
no.
too difficult to decide what you're putting on and when and in what context. Right. It's just
otherwise I'm fake all the time.
Yeah.
Either I'm fake as the rabbi, or I'm fake as the dad, or I'm fake as the husband, I'm fake as whatever it is. As it turns out, I actually believe very much in the life that I'm living. I believe very much in the values that I preach. I believe very much in the lessons that I teach. And I think it's important for people to know that it's possible.
100%. So I'm going to jump back for a quick second. What took you from filmmaker then to rabbi?
Yeah, what took me. So this is another good story. So in the story, it was like an instant, and I was totally inspired. I had an awakening or a calling. That makes Jews very uncomfortable, that notion. It sounds very Christian. But the truth is, I think it was gradual. It was actually born out of a certain degree of success. I had my film released in 2008 by Sony. It was called Tortured, and starred Lawrence Fishburne and Cole Hauser and James Cromwell. And it was released by Sony. And then I started being invited to lots of horror and thriller meetings in terms of like, this is what we're looking for. Can you write this? Since I wrote and directed it, can you write this? Are you interested? Blah, blah, blah. Great. So I often found myself like watching the scariest movies, trying to dissect them, trying to understand in my mind how to put it together, how they put it together. Right at that same time, almost exactly at the same time, we had our daughter. And I remember distinctly standing in our family room, holding my daughter, who was an infant, in my arms, watching The Ring on TV, and because the producer asked for an elevated version of The Ring. By the way, The Ring is extraordinarily elevated in terms of concept. So I was watching The Ring, and I felt like I covered her ears because I felt like it would damage her neshama, her soul, in some way, watching this movie. So there was already like a question in my mind, like, was I put on earth to pitch horror films for the rest of my life? Is that what I was supposed to do? Like, with all of my upbringing and education and everything, is this what I'm here for? And we started to get invited to like successful filmmaker parties where you would see like this house and movie posters all over the house that were like bloody knives and like smoking guns, and the movie poster paid for the entire house. Like, I didn't really see a lot of houses with like family portraits on the wall, like houses like we grew up in, right? Yep. And you come out here and you start to see this stuff, and it makes sense. These people are proud of the thing that they do that allows them to be successful. And that really wasn't the house that I imagined. That wasn't like the image that I had in my mind. And the kind of crisis of conscience that I had in terms of like, am I supposed to be doing this thing? It led me to begin to ask questions, which is always a great first step. Okay, so I used to write screenplays at Barnes & Noble. It should rest in peace. I don't know, maybe it exists.
They're reviving.
They're reviving.
They're
great.
coming back.
I don't know what they sell there, but that's great. Barnes & Noble and Borders, and I used to write at Beverly Hills Library. So wherever there was like a place that was quiet with desks and a coffee shop, that combination allowed me to go there and work for hours on end. So I would go there and work, and occasionally I would stop the person working there at the bookstore, and I would say to them, so I'm going through this thing, and like, I'm not sure that I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be writing horror films. So like, what do you recommend that I read that like gives me direction about like now it sounds like a silly question, but like when you say that to somebody at the library or somebody at Barnes & Noble, I'm going to ruin it for you, but like they're not trained to answer that question. What they are trained to respond is, what do you like to read? And so I'd say like, oh, so after we would talk for like 5 minutes, they would direct me either to self-help or to philosophy or to history. So I would read like 5 pages of Tony Robbins, and I'd be like, this is not what I'm looking for, right? And I close the book. Or philosophy, and I'm like, no, this is beyond what I'm comfortable thinking about, or whatever it is. This went on for months and months. And I was at a very fortuitous lunch, an industry lunch for a meeting at a place called Factor's Deli on Pico Boulevard, okay, which is a famous deli. In LA, all delis are famous. So there's a Factor's famous deli, Cantor's famous deli, there was Jerry's famous deli, they're all famous, okay? So I was at Factor's Deli on Pico Boulevard, and I came out of the lunch and I was about to participate in the holiest ritual in all of Hollywood, and that is the valet line, okay? Because whenever you give them your ticket, you can be rest assured that the fanciest, most expensive cars are coming out first. It doesn't matter what order you gave it in, because like that shows you who's important and who's not important, right? So if you have a Ferrari, it's coming out right away, right? I knew that my Prius wasn't coming out for a long, long time. So I turned around on the sidewalk, and right there, because I knew I had plenty of time, right there, next to Factor's Deli, was a Jewish bookstore called the Mitzvah Store. And I walked into the Mitzvah Store, and thank God, Rabbi Kraft was working that day behind the counter of the Mitzvah Store. And I walked in and I said to him, first of all, I perused the shelves very awkwardly. And then I said to him, just out of curiosity, like, I'm kind of going through this thing, blah, blah, blah. What should I be reading?
Perfect.
And he looked at me like I asked the dumbest question in the history of the world. And he said to me, the Torah. You should be reading the Torah. I was like, the Torah? So I went home. He's like, do you have a Chumash? I said, yeah, I have a Chumash at home, which is like the Torah printed in a book form. And I went home, and he's like, on Shabbos, when you wake up on Saturday morning, you read the Parsha for that week. Fine. I knew how to do that. I grew up, like, I knew how to read Hebrew. I went to Israel. That's great. So I went home. I opened up day school education, everything. I went home. I opened up the Chumash. It happened to be Parsha Lech Lecha. It was all about Abraham's journey. And as a second grader at Solomon Schechter, I was forced to memorize and recite those opening lines. Like I stood in front of the class, Lech Lecha Martzecha Mimoladacha Mi Beit Avicha LaEretz HaShorecha. Like I still remember all the words. Those words meant nothing to me in second grade, but I got a good grade, and I could recite it like longer than a lot of the students. So here, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, Abraham is like a man who's got a wife who's searching for the meaning of life, who's on a journey, who with an undefined destination. Like, I'm like, this story's all about me. Like totally resonated in my kishkis. I'm like, this is great. So I come back the next week and I do it again on Saturday morning. I open up the Chumash, I keep reading. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Third week, 3 weeks in a row, it all works. I come back to Rabbi Kraft and I'm like, I love it. I looked at him like Yoda. It was like an oracle in my life. I'm like, love it. Perfect. What's the next thing I should read? He's like, now you read Rashi. I'm like, done. I went home. I started reading Rashi. Made no sense. Came back the following week. I'm like, Rashi makes no sense. Like, you have to read a book called What's Bothering Rashi. Went home that week. I read the book called What's Bothering Rashi. I came back to the mitzvah store. I'm like, been reading Rashi. I totally get it now. Totally get everything. Rashi happens to cite this other book called the Talmud a lot. What book is that? I'd like to read that. He's like, the Talmud is this shelf and this shelf and this shelf and this shelf. He's like, no, most people don't like learn like you're learning. Like most people don't go home, read a book, come back and have like a book report session with me and then ask for another book. Like what you need is you need to go to a place where people sit and study together. I was like a kollel in Skokie. He was like, yeah, like a kollel in Skokie. And that was like what was in my mind. I was like, Rabbi Kraft, I think we've reached the end of our journey together. And I shook his hand. I walked out of that store and I thought I was done. And then serendipitously, I was brought to American Jewish University for a meeting with my brother. And on my way out, I passed the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies. And I popped my head in. And if you went to Ziegler at that time, there was a secretary working there. If you list all of the traits that a good secretary should have in terms of being warm and welcoming and facilitating conversation and all this, she had none of those. It was the exact opposite. And so I walked in and I said, oh, what is this? This is like West Coast JTS. And she's like, no, this is not West Coast JTS. This is our own thing, Ziegler. Oh, this is great. You train rabbis? Like, yeah. Can you take classes here? Yeah. Can I have a brochure? For what? My brother said, for what? What are you doing? So I said, well, you put the brochures for people who like want information about this, interested in this program. So maybe when someone asks if you have a brochure, she and I never got along, but that's besides the point. So I took the brochure home, I read it, and like 2 weeks later, I woke up one day and I looked at my wife and I said, we had a child at this point, and we were in our townhouse in Beverly Hills. And I looked at her and I said, I think I need to go study to become a rabbi. I'm not going to become a rabbi. I just feel like I need to know what they know. I feel like that's what I'm missing. And she nodded her head like you. She didn't smile. She raised her eyebrows like you. She didn't smile at all. And little by little, she came around to it and said, okay, go ahead. If this is what you think you need, go ahead. So after the first year, I came back and I was like, I think I'm going to go through the first 2 years. After that, I think we're going to go to Israel next year. We're going to live there. At that time, we had 2 children. And the kids were 4 and 2 when we moved to Jerusalem and lived there and put them in school there, which was a great decision. And when we came back, I said to her, you know, I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think I'm actually going to become a rabbi. She's like, everyone knows you're going to be a rabbi. Go be like the best rabbi. And it was like that scene in Rocky 2. I always like relate it back to movies. Like when he wakes up from that, when she wakes up from the coma, win. Right. That's right. Like, go in. And then Mickey's like, what are we waiting for? That was it. That was like what I needed. I needed to hear that it was like, okay. So, yeah. So that was the story. During rabbinical school, I made 2 documentaries. I tried to merge filmmaking and
Roadmap Genesis.
Roadmap Genesis and Roadmap Jerusalem. And I think that that was also very positive in the sense that I tried to put it all together, because when I started rabbinical school, I thought that like the previous 10 years of my life were a complete waste. I thought that like everybody coming to rabbinical school was straight out of like undergraduate school. The majority of my class, there were very few like adults who were married, who like had family, who like were settled. A lot of them were like out of undergraduate school and they had majored in Jewish studies, or they majored in Hebrew, and I thought to myself, this is like beyond me already. And as it turned out, all the tools that I had accumulated over the course of the previous 10 years play some part in my life today.
Oh, I've seen it.
So I think that I think a lot of being a leader in the Jewish tradition is being able to tell a good story.
How are you bringing that in daily and weekly at Chill?
I think it comes out in my sermons. I think it comes out in my writing. I write a lot at this point, whether it be for, newspaper, media type stuff, journals, or whether it's my own book. I think that it comes out in being able to direct. You know, directing is the ability to look at something
There
happening
it is.
and recognize that it could be better or it could be different. Most people look at an event occurring and just accept, like, this is good or this is bad.
Well, and it's not just the event, right? But I mean, there are many stories and many chapters to what you're directing right now and
exactly
what
right.
you can be directing for a broader community.
That's right. And so, but I think it's a skill to say, I'm looking at something and how do I make it better? Because directing is the skill of being able to communicate what that aspirational version is, right? So we're here, we want to be somewhere else. What kind of note can I give you to draw out the better version versus what do I say that absolutely squashes you? And you have that power, especially as someone's supervisor, let's just say. You have the power to absolutely squash them and say, you're doing a bad job. Or you have the power of saying, like, what if you tried it this way?
How are you having difficult conversations?
With who?
With anybody, with community members here, with your external too, because you're strongly convicted,
Yeah.
right? You're highly intelligent. You have a lot of historical context, and you're extremely articulate.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you'd tell that through this interview, but we have, I feel like any difficult conversation, whether it be in a professional sense or a private sense, has to be done with a great sense of love.
absolutely.
So no difficult conversation should end a relationship. I think that if you come in with the idea that you are going to you're going to remain in relationship with this person, then any difficult conversation has to be reconciled very differently than if you say, I'm never going to speak or see this person ever again.
100%.
And if I'm going to have that conversation with somebody, I might as well just write an email or a text at this point. Like, there's no reason to waste my time if I never want to see the person again or talk to the person again. Like, I'm sorry, but there's just not enough time in the day to do these kinds of things. Most of my conversations that are difficult, though, are with people that I do want to remain in a relationship with. And so whether it be difficult or whether it be, terrific, enjoyable, I think that it has to be envisioned along the same line, that we're going to say things to each other, and then at the end, we're going to give each other a hug.
So are you a good listener?
I try to be a good listener.
Are you able to change your opinion?
I think I'm open on a lot of issues. I think I'm open. I think people come to me and with suggestions all the time. And I think that I think I'm fairly good at assessing whether or not something is a good idea. I think I'm pretty good at assessing where our community sits, like taking the temperature of the room. Like, this is going to work, this is not going to work. And I think that I think the openness to new ideas doesn't necessarily should not be judged by the openness to bad ideas.
Absolutely.
So even if you hear 100 ideas and you only take one, if the one's a winner, that makes everything better. It doesn't mean that you should try to implement 100 ideas just because you heard 100 ideas.
100%. So what's a life well lived? How would you define that?
I've taught this before here. In the Jewish tradition, we often judge people by the life that their grandchildren live. Because you can scare your children or control your children into following your instructions, your teachings, your values. But for grandchildren to follow your values means that it had to be transmitted in a loving way, because it means that multiple generations have to understand the value of what it is. So I like to think of myself as living out the values presented to me by my grandparents. And I'd like to think that my children live out the values of my parents. And I'd like to think that one day I will look down to grandchildren and see them living in a way that makes me proud as well. I think that it's easy to say my kids make me proud. Then the kids leave the house, go to college, because we're almost there. It's super depressing. And And then you hope then they start making decisions really on their own. So you hope that they make good decisions on their own. You hope that they find partners in life that reflect the type of human being that you want them to be as well. And you hope that then they choose to raise kids in that tradition. If that all plays out, I think I'll have lived a life well. If the Jewish community is in a better place as a result of my career, I think then I lived a career well. I worked well. My work was meaningful. It succeeded. But I also think that if, 20, 30 years from now, whenever the end of my career comes, if I look at the generation and they think they're going to be the last generation of Jews, we'll be in the exact same place. And I'll know the Jewish people is in good hands because we passed down that tradition as well.
Awesome. What are some non-negotiables in your daily and weekly routine?
Non-negotiables.
We got caffeine. We got Coke Zeros.
Yeah, that's all caffeine. It's all the same bucket. So I wake up my morning routine is crucial. Okay, so that's like non-negotiable. In some ways, that's what forces me to get up the time that I do. So I get up, and I usually get on the Peloton and I listen to podcasts. Okay, so my favorite is Dan Senior, Call Me Back. I listen to the Times of Israel Daily Briefing to get the news from Israel in 15 minutes. I'll listen to the other day I just listened to Ezra Klein and Ben Shapiro in conversation with one another. I listen to a whole bunch of different things. Then shower, come out, and I normally put on my talis and tefillin and get started. So for me, that some days of the week it happens here in Daily Minyan, or it happens in my living room at home at the dining room table. Either way, I think it's really important that I start with that kind of prayer, and I start acknowledging that there's something bigger than me in this world, in this existence. I think that that's crucial for all of us to acknowledge that we are not the biggest thing in our lives. I think there's a reason that Moses was called the man with the greatest sense of humility in the entire world. I think that humility and gratitude are the two qualities that we see, major shortfall of today. So I try to start out there during the day. I try to start out there in the morning. Usually that gets disrupted at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I either come to work, there's some kind of like loud speaking about a test that's happening in the high school class that we were preparing for at home the night before, whatever. Kids getting out is usually involved. It's very loud in my house, kids getting off to school, wherever they're going. All of there's a lot of energy, and I come here to work, and those morning meetings are usually friendly, and that's the friendliest, most like outgoing version of myself is first when I wake up in the morning, when I come here. Usually then around lunchtime, it like becomes more serious meetings. And then in the afternoon for whole, become, I don't want to say perfunctory meetings, but like,
stuff you got to get done.
Stuff you got to get done, right?
Yeah.
So that's when like bar mitzvah kids come in because they're done with school, and those meetings don't require like the same brain power, sitting through like talking to 12 and 13-year-olds about the speech that they're going to give, or their Torah portion, or what Nike gym shoes that they're going to have made custom for their celebration. And then in the evening time, usually my non-negotiable is the way I wake up. The non-negotiable is I try to get home between 5 and 7. That's so I don't have today's not a good example of that, right? Because you came into town. I don't have a good day off during the week, and I offered to trade my day off for an expectation that I would be home for dinner. So I try my hardest to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I try my hardest to make it happen. I have a whole lot of people who try to make it happen here on the floor, try to protect that time. because usually I'm at a meeting in the evening time. Then there's a board meeting or a committee meeting or something, or a program or something I have to be at starting at 7:30. So that's the day, more or less, and over and over again.
What do you think are the responsibilities today of spiritual leaders that maybe weren't in the past? What are you
That
feeling?
weren't in the past?
Yeah.
It's hard to say. It depends how far in the past we're talking about. But I don't think that American Jewish spiritual leaders had to negotiate with politics as often as we're going to be expected to in the years to come. And I think that was part of the safe haven that was this country for American Jews and American Judaism. And I think that it's not that we took it for granted, but we never expected that it would change. I think that now we see that there are threatening forces at play. So I also think that my predecessors didn't have to take the types of stances that we have to take on Israel and on other issues as well here. I think that it allowed them to work in a way that wasn't upsetting for anyone, right? So there was a certain neutrality that allowed them to just
Separation of church and state.
separation of church and state, and the rabbi became a kind of just a family member that was not upsetting in any way, that was just kind of there. I think that we have a different challenge ahead of us, and I think that most of the rabbis of my generation who are out there and successful understand the challenge and understand the need to rise up to meet it.
How many people like you are there out there? Rabbis like yourself who, I will say one of the things that's really inspiring, one of the reasons I wanted to spend time with you is after we spent that time in Chicago, quite frankly, I was like, fuck, he gets it. He can connect, he can make it relevant, and he speaks our language, right? So it's engaging. And, I think I say engaging, and I mean it like in the full spectrum of like, oh my God, I want more, right? And I don't see that in lots of places from a religious standpoint, right?
Right. So I think there are plenty of rabbis like me. I think if you talk to my parents, I'm, very special and one of a kind.
The
only one. But I think there are more rabbis like me. I think that we all, thank God, are different though. And I think that that's important for us. I don't think we've ever been a monolith as a people. We've always spoken on a wide variety of topics in a wide variety of manner. And I think that it's important that we keep that, because that's what keeps us together. That's what keeps us bound together as a people, is that we can find different paths.
But I think engaging the community, right? Engage in the community is, I feel like, so necessary.
I think this is a great moment for me. I think this is a great moment for the community. I think there are lots of rabbis who are enjoying this moment. There's a lot of factors pushing people towards a resurgence of synagogue life. Professionals are calling this the surge.
They are.
The surge. So in Jewish professional terms, we're all experiencing the surge. The question is, how long will the surge go for? And I think that the surge is like a wave, and Jewish professionals are like surfers, right? So if you watch surfers surf the wave, right, some of them fall off because they hit something that's unexpected, but those people who can ride the wave all the way in, right, they're out there to catch the next wave right away. And that's what this is about. Is I think this is probably October 7th began a surge that will turn into another surge, that will turn into another surge, because I don't see the socioeconomic, political factors coming down anytime soon.
No.
And so unfortunately, I think that synagogue, and fortunately because of synagogue, because of the safety here, I think that there's going to be this increased sense of importance and significance in people's lives. And I think that for that reason, it's all the more important that we do a good job convincing young, talented, intelligent people to become rabbis. And I think that we need to convince those young, intelligent, articulate people to adopt this kind of worldview, this perspective.
How do you think about that relative to living in a capitalistic society? Right?
Yeah, I think it's easier because we live in a capitalist society. So if we think that, let's flip it on its head and consider from the opposite perspective. If we were living in a place like Europe where governments pay the clergy, right?
Be much harder.
And you say to yourself, well, how would we ever convince someone to become a rabbi? We can't pay them more. We can't make their lifestyle any different. We can't turn the dial at all, where that job is kind of slotted in for what that job is going to be. Well, that's not the case here. That's not the case at all. So and I don't know what the reasons are. I mean, I suspect there was just a report released that I read this past week about why the rabbinate feels older and less content than it's ever been before in this country. But let's just say that that's the case. The question is, well, can we turn the dials and make the rabbinate feel more content? Can we make it more appealing? How do we do that? And the answer is, this country is uniquely situated to answer those questions. The Jewish community here can do that. We can either fundraise to make it a higher paying job. We can hire more rabbis to make it a less hour a day type of job. We can hire more assistant rabbis to serve under rabbis who we think are actually leading the community in the right direction. I think that we can reward rabbis in lots of different ways for choosing this life. And I also think that in doing so, we have to recognize that the most powerful reason that anybody ever becomes a rabbi is because they see somebody rabbi and they want to emulate that person. Somebody taps them on the shoulder and says, I think you'd make a great rabbi. And so are we doing that? Are we doing that? Or are we just kind of like letting kids seep out of Jewish community into, law firms and hospitals and practices and investment banks and hedge funds and all this stuff because we just assume that that's what they're going to be? I think this is worth fighting for.
If you could get everyone to pray for one thing, what would it be?
Wisdom. I think we lack a certain collective wisdom. And I think that, in our tradition, in our most important prayer moments, we often pray in the plural, right? So in an iconic sense on Yom Kippur, we pray for forgiveness. We've all sinned. We've all lied. We've all stolen. We've all whatever. Nobody says, which one of us is the one that stole out of the community. But I think that in today's world, I would say we could all stand and say, forgive us. We were all short-sighted. We all thought history was over. We all thought that. And I think that having a vision and a wisdom about the long game here is, essential.
Yep. I would throw in humility.
Humility is also
that we can hold that space.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe wisdom and humility.
Yep. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
What advice would I give for my 20-year-old self? That's such a good question. Because I think I made lots of decisions that ultimately, that don't necessarily, one wouldn't think is reflected in who I am right now, but I think it all led to who I am right now. So it wouldn't be like, don't do this, don't do that. I think if I could talk to my 20-year-old self, I would say to myself, like, you're going to be okay. I think that's what my 20-year-old self needed to hear, was like, it's all going to work out.
So in your 20s, did you go through a lot of like uncertainty?
Yeah, for sure.
Insecurity.
Wrote screenplays, spend a year writing something, you send it out, you wait 6 months for somebody to read it. You wait 6 months for somebody to read it. It's like not important to them. You have like all of your eggs in one basket that this person's gonna change your life, or this person, because in Hollywood there's no place to do business. It's not like you're going to an office to do it. And so you go to somebody's office for a meeting, or you go to somebody else's office for a meeting. You meet somebody who's at a fancy restaurant driving a van, just drives. I'm a producer. I made a movie 10 years ago. Like, this guy could totally introduce me to so and so, and it could happen. So there's this sense of chance that you can just win the lottery at any moment, and that's dangerous. Also, it's dangerous to live in a world where any moment can be defining,
especially for seekers, right? You grab onto whatever it could be.
That's right.
Is happiness a choice or a consequence of something deeper?
No, I think it's a choice. I think it's very much a choice. Smiling is a choice. Happiness is a choice. And I think that some of the people who have experienced unconscionable tragedy in their life, who I know now, are actually, I think, some of the people who smile and exude warmth better than others. And I think that that's it's a lesson to all of us. I think some of the people whose lives kind of have panned out completely, and I don't know the challenges that they've necessarily faced. It feels to me like they have a hard time
Appreciating
it, expressing happiness.
Yeah. What do you believe now that you didn't believe 10 years ago?
I think I have a greater belief now than I did 10 years ago that that the Jewish people is going to be okay. I think that after living through the last 2 years, I think that I have a sense that when we pull together, we can accomplish anything. And I think that I don't live anymore with a fundamental concern that the world is not going to like us anymore. Once you reach that point, like, we ought to be the best version of ourselves. And that version contributes to every aspect of society. In every society we've ever touched, we've always made it better. And if the world doesn't want that, then that's on them. Then that's on them. And we should keep being the best version of ourselves and keep moving forward the way that we are. And I used to think that we were, if this didn't happen or that didn't happen or there would be collapse of all the stuff. Well, we saw the most devastating moment since the Holocaust, since the Shoah. We all witnessed it. We all saw the aftermath of it. And as it turns out, we pulled through. So I think this is actually a moment of incredible resilience. And to me, it's reassuring.
What's one thing you're struggling with right now, wrestling with a topic that doesn't seem to, that you haven't found your way through in?
I'm trying to just begin the writing process on my next book, trying to think about it. And I read Fukuyama's book, The End of History, on one of my plane rides. And I'm like completely smitten with it. And also I struggle with like how that helps inform what I think about history. So I didn't have to read the book in college. Everybody's like, I read it 20 years ago in college. I didn't have to read it in college. I was reading like How to Frame a Shot in college. But I feel like the Fukuyama talks about how he's not talking about the end of events, but he's talking about how all of history pushes towards liberal democracy. And I'd like to think that he's right. And I'd like to think that even when we, swing way outside, we're going to revert back to the norm. And I think that we might have very rocky times ahead of us, but I think that we're going to be all right. I really do. I believe in the power of our tradition. I believe in the power of the American people, and I think that we're going to figure it out. And LA has been terrific. So far, things are going really well out here. We'll see.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you for coming out here to visit
Yeah,
me for the podcast. And next time I'll have you on my podcast and I'll ask you about the Parsha.
I will prep. This is awesome. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, man.